the Leading Well, Supporting the Human Side of Business Ownership series. And today we are talking about mental health of leaders and of our people. So I don't think that it's a stretch for me to say that 2025 was quite a year. It's been noticed by lots of us, including Brene Brown. And we came across an article that Brene wrote just a couple of months ago where she was talking about the American worker today and how right now people aren't okay. Things changed so drastically, so quickly, and so often in 2025. And the human mind was not wired for that. And now that it's been going on for a year, and possibly even longer than that, if you were to go all the way back to COVID, when everything changed then, we're looking at entering the 6th year of very fast change. And with human beings not being naturally wired for this is a really good time to be talking about mental health. So with that, we have 3 incredible experts with us today, all from the NAWBO circle. First is Bridget Richard. She is the owner and CEO of Lamplight Counseling Services in Medina, Ohio, and she is an independently licensed clinical social worker. She has 3 offices in Greater Cleveland and serves clients virtually throughout the state of Ohio. She has 25 master's level clinicians that work for her. It's a pretty big practice. We also have Monica Arroyo. She is the clinical director and owner of Family Therapy Broward in Florida, and she has one large location with 23 clinicians, another large practice. And Anna McChesney. She is the CEO and owner of the Center for Creative Healing in Richmond, Virginia. She specializes in creative strategies to combat burnout. She has 3 offices and a team of 20 staff members that do community-based therapy services. So that's when they actually go out into the community. So you can see why I'm so excited to have these 3 with us. These are not just individual, not that there's anything wrong with that, but these are women who run large therapy practices. And so the information that they would have and the experience that they would have is much expanded and across the country. So with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the flow of how this is going to go today. I'm going to rotate questions across the panel so that we can hear diverse perspectives on related themes. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A at the end. So if you have a question that you are hoping to get answered here today, please put it in the chat. I do want to make sure that you know that this call is being recorded. If we run out of time to get to the questions, that's why I want you to put them in the chat so that we know whose questions they are, because we can come back and get answers to those questions and get them to you afterwards. What's also going to happen after this call today is that you're going to receive an email that's going to have a couple of special things in it. First, there will be a link to that Brene Brown article along with an article summary. And there's going to be a burnout questionnaire that you can take yourself, that you can use with your people. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that questionnaire during the next hour or two to make sure that you know what to do with this tool that's going to be sent to you. All right, let's get going. Let's set the scene. Bridget, we're going to start with you. And can you tell us, what does ambient stress look like inside small and mid-sized businesses today?
Yes, I can, and thank you for asking. This is a discussion I've been having frequently over the last month. And so ambient stress, what is ambient stress? Ambient stress is the stress that's always on in the background. And right now, even if you're seeing it with your employees, it's not just happening at work. People don't live in silos. We have global events, we have local uncertainty, we have family caregiving, we have finances and health all show up at work. So inside our small and mid-sized businesses, it often looks like productive teams, but with thinner emotional margins. So you're going to see shorter patience, you're going to see faster fatigue, and you're going to see more errors, even though there's less room for it. And so that's going to be seen as frustration.
Everybody seeing that? Yeah, Anna, Monica? You're seeing this too, aren't you? I know we're seeing it everywhere. Yeah, Connie says in the chat, yes, we do see this. I especially see the quick to be irritable coming out in, yeah, in people that sometimes it doesn't seem like one of their normal characteristics. So
Absolutely.
excellent. Yes. Thank you very much, Bridget. How does chronic workplace stress and burnout physically affect the brain? I know this was a little bit of what Brene Brown was talking about in her article. What is it actually doing? How does it affect our brains?
Thank you, Linda, for inviting us to have this important conversation. I think many of us are definitely experiencing stress and also chronic stress. So I wanted to start with saying that stress for most of us is good, is something that moves us and motivates us. But what happens is when we're stuck in that chronic state with no break, that's what leads to burnout. That's what leads to, and burnout has been defined as a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion that is caused by this prolonged stress. So when we are in that treadmill that never ends and our system is not able to reset, now we know because of science, because of MRIs, that there are specific changes in the brain that happen. And so there's three parts of our brain that get impacted. So we have the survival skill that goes on when we are under threat, which is what drives the fight, flight, or freeze response, and that is driven by that amygdala. So our amygdala gets stuck in the on mode, which is what causes us to be reactive. It causes us to be anxious, to be frustrated. And then we also know that the hippocampus, which is the area where we have memory and where emotional regulation lives, that part actually shrinks down. So now we are much more dysregulated emotionally, and our memory begins to get impacted. And then the last part that gets impacted is our prefrontal cortex, which is where we make all this decision-making process, our attention, and our ability to manage things. So we can see now how when we are under prolonged stress, we know break inside, the important parts of our brain get dysregulated, and then we are left basically in a hot mess, which is what we're trying to kind of do differently here, right? And so that is why this talk about stress and the impact on the brain is so important, because I think for especially for a lot of women and many of us who are business owners work used to constantly being under stress, but we don't realize the impact that it can have biologically, physically on us.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that. And what I also find very interesting about this is as I'm listening to talk about these symptoms, right? Like irritability, memory loss. Um, okay, ladies, it's not all menopause. It's not. No, those are symptoms of menopause. However, when you're under prolonged stress over a long period of time, that also creates the same thing. And I found that so fascinating as I was listening to you talk about the different symptoms. I'm like, what else does that sound like? Oh, I know. Right? But
So true.
it might be stress. So, how do you recommend that leaders describe those effects in plain language for their team? So, let's say we've got somebody and one of their employees, they're exhibiting these things, or if you want to talk to your team about this is what stress does. What's some plain language that leaders can use?
So I think part of it is as leaders are educated that it could be a component of burnout, that maybe what they're seeing is not just a disgruntled employee, but is somebody who's really struggling to stay present, right? They name that they're seeing that employees show up differently, maybe not as enthusiastic. One of the things that we burnout that we see that is different than menopause, well, maybe, is this the cynical piece kicks in, the burnout that we don't care as much, right? We might be absent. And so is noticing our employees that maybe were key performers now showing up differently and asking,
Mm.
checking in with them, how are you doing? How are you doing with how tired are you? How much capacity maybe you even have for the tasks that you are doing? Because we might be the first ones to notice that they are not shining in the way that they used to shine. Because they're not able to make the decisions or not in the capacity that they used to be able to make them. And that is like, and we'll get more to it, we'll talk more about it as we go on, but that is what we begin to notice. So just kind of saying, hey, I noticed that you are not showing up in the way that you used to. Is there something else going on with you?
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, Anna, we're going to get you up in here too. So, um, I know this is right up your wheelhouse, and you work closely with emotional regulation in individuals and teams. So, how can leaders recognize when employees are operating from a stress response rather than true engagement? So, what does that look like in your
Mhm.
experience?
Yeah, Monica for sure started to hit on it a little bit. There's that kind of checking out response. There's also, I think, what we often miss is the over functioning response. So that person on your team that's like almost acting as if they're really driven, that's maybe running around busy all the time, that's really sticking to like deadlines, maybe has a huge sense of urgency when completing tasks or even in conversation. I find that that's almost what's often overlooked, because they're driven by the anxiety or the stress response rather than a genuine motivation, which again is part of what Monica was mentioning of this nervous system response. Some people have that urgency to do more or to flee a situation. So that can be something that I often find is what's being missed in a team that is operating under stress.
I think I see myself in that. I
We did
wasn't
mention that.
expecting that. It wasn't, that was, you got me. You got me, Anna. I wasn't expecting that. But yes, the urgency feeling, the constant, the anxiety, stress response,
Mhm.
and the because I was automatically going to people will get irritable, they'll check out, they'll numb out, but I'm like, oh my gosh,
Hmm. Yeah.
there you
Yeah.
go. That's
Hmm.
brilliant. All right, great. Okay, we're going to do round two now. We're going to shift our focus a little bit to looking at leader support and what brave leadership looks like in this environment. So, Bridget, we're going to go back to you. Here's your question. We know that leaders want to support mental health without stepping outside of their lane or acting as therapists. Like no boss wants to be accused of doing therapy in the office on their employees, right? So, what
Right.
does effective mental health support look like for leaders while staying in their leadership lane? And what specific behaviors or boundaries would be helpful to them to know?
Fabulous question. And even though I have a therapy practice, I still have to walk this line because, therapists have stressors, but, it gets weird. So right now we're seeing that sense of urgency. The urgency that I've been hearing is a continuous theme, right? And so there's this almost underlying continuous partial urgency as well. So even when we don't have those deadlines in front of us. So everything feels like it's time sensitive and the world itself feels unsafe, right? And if it goes on long enough, we start to interpret that as normal, which is really not normal. And so that new normal, which we should be rejecting, vehemently, starts to erode our recovery, our creativity, our trust. And so we start to pull back. So when all these outside stressors stack on top of the work stress, even well-run teams can start to feel overwhelmed. What does effective support for this whole thing look like? It's about creating the conditions to support people through this, not about therapy. And it can feel like therapy, but if your leaders are staying in their lane and they're focusing on clarity, predictability, and permission, getting the buy-in, not just throwing things at people and expecting them to take it on, your people are going to do better. If you're clear priorities so people aren't guessing what matters, because guessing creates more ambient stress. Predictable rhythms, so your meetings, you know when they're going to happen. They're not going to be over lunch or at 5 o'clock, please. Feedback consistently, whether it's positive or negative. It's better to get negative feedback and to know that it's done than to wonder what's going on. So don't be afraid of that. Just make sure that they know that this is happening on a not scheduled but consistent basis. And then expectations. They know that the expectations of them are not going to ebb and flow and change. And then this is the big one, having permission to use resources without stigma. If I ask for a day off, we are not questioning them why. If I am saying, do you have the number to the EAP? We are not saying, so what's going on with you? You just give it to them unconditionally, and people will be more likely to use that.
But permission, that's a big one. Thank you. In this environment, in this leadership, leading our people environment, what does being brave look like for leaders right now? And how do courage and care show up in real decisions, especially when balancing performance and well-being?
Yeah, I love this. And I would actually love to give you a whole bunch of personal scenarios, how this is even recently, like we were saying this week, which already felt like a month, has come up for me. But instead, I'm going to stick with the question. So brave for leaders is about choosing presence over performance. I think as a woman leader right now, and of course, of us all being, NAWBO members, I think we have a tendency to move fast towards performance, towards a goal. And oftentimes, instead of pausing to wait for your team to catch up, or to celebrate the goal that you just achieved, we often move on to the next thing. And I believe being courageous and showing care in leadership is about those pauses. It's about pausing when you're rolling out something to check your team's capacity. It's about checking how they're feeling about what's coming up. Are they on board? Are they on the same page as you? Making sure that their well-being is a priority. And leading from that place yourself. This is where the personal work comes in, y'all. Leading from that place of regulation, of modeling how to be calm and intentional, which can look like slow, but slow equals fast in a lot of trauma-informed language. So being intentional with your time, with your staff, and creating that safety so that people can do well with their work. And so that might, again, be like pausing, like you're in a conversation and somebody says something, and instead of just going straight to, hey, I've got a solution for this, pausing to respond to what they've said and maybe what's underneath what they've said, what you've noticed, I think, as Bridget said, instead of just going straight to solution or goal or performance.
I love that. Practicing being present and being able to take that pause. I love it too, that going slow can actually be going fast. Mm-hmm. And with so many, especially with women, we are moving fast. We're used to moving fast. We're used to having so many hats and so many things on our plate all the time that we get going and going and going and going. And that anxiety response, you're right, the antidote to that is presence. All right, Monica, for women business owners, what signs should we be looking for in ourselves and in our teams that suggest that we may be beyond burnout and disconnecting or numbing out? Which, whether or not, I don't know if our audience is aware of the numb out next phase of burnout or not. But once somebody has burned out, that's when they completely check out and they numb out and they cease caring. How do we know? How do we know when somebody's getting there?
The best way that burnout was explained to me is almost like a flame in a candle that goes off. right? And so it completely depletes you of enthusiasm and your drive. And so for so many business women leaders and business owners, that there was so much passion, so much heart that was put into creating this team, this business. Now all of a sudden, after you have been in this chronic stress, it doesn't matter anymore. It's like your baby doesn't matter anymore. And I think that's the cynical piece that kicks in, that when we talk about from getting burnout to total burnout, is even when you do hit your goals, you're not as invested any longer. It even like making decisions that could change the course of your company team. It's that part of you that you just can't give anymore. There's nothing left to give. And women as caretakers, we stay on way too long because we're trying to make sure that everybody's okay. And that's the part, and what Sana was saying, the pause is so important. But if the one of the big red flags are just being cynical, not having satisfaction about the things that you used to care so much about, not being able to celebrate your wins, beginning to notice that maybe you are not going to work or your team is being absent, missing deadlines, especially when that was something that was not in your wheelhouse, missing deadlines, not being as detail oriented, and just not having that creativity piece that was so in part of who we are and what we do. That's how we really begin to see burnout. And people say it's just I'm numb out. I feel so removed. I wish that somebody would just step in and just do it for me because I can't see it. And that's where a lot of business owners they sell their business or their team just disintegrates because the leader is no longer leading because the leader needed a pause, a break that they couldn't get. So those are the biggest red flags is the cynicism that happens and the I just don't care anymore mentality that takes place.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. It's
It
heartbreaking. Everybody's got a
is.
dream. We all started this because we had a dream. We had something we wanted to do, something we wanted to accomplish. And the thought of losing that to the place of not being able to care anymore, it's just heartbreaking. Thank you. Thank you for that knowledge. And we're going to slide on into round 3 here, Bridget. We talked a little bit about the ability to get present, the ability to take a pause. And that kind of lays into this concept of margin. When we're all doing too many things and there's too much on our plates, then there's no time left over, not even just for ourselves, but even to have that leadership time to be able to vision, to be able to plan, to be able to really lead. And so let's talk a little bit about margin in all of this. Bridget, how do we find it?
I'll let you know if I find out. No,
Good.
I believe everybody who is on this call, and I know quite a few of the people who are on this call, we're all high capacity women. That's how we got here. That is both a blessing and a curse because not only do we know we're high capacity women, but everybody around us does. So it is our job to know when to say when and to tell other people we've said when. Okay. Keep that in mind. So root causes, role overload without recovery. We are strategist, operator, HR, crisis manager all at the same time, especially our small business people who do not have HR departments and things of that nature. You're wearing all the hats. We don't put time on the calendar. And for ourselves, instead, what we do is we fill it out, all the downtime with everything else that is happening, right? So, oh, I have downtime at work. Well, now I'm going to go do my mom thing. I'm going to do my caregiving. We don't stop. So that's one thing. The other thing is we have a whole bunch of unresolved uncertainty, which is part of that ambient stress. We've got regulatory changes, economic pressures, constant decision making, and we all function because we're leaders with incomplete information. We're the ones who complete it. Extra stress. So actionable things. Clarify who decides what. And sometimes that's not you, and sometimes you have to live with they're not going to do it your way. But if it's not your decision to make, let them make the decision. Stop revisiting settled decisions. Nothing is going to be perfect. You're going to have an aha. Leave it alone. You don't have the bandwidth to go back and fix other things. You need to keep moving forward. And then build margin on purpose. I know it's hard. We were all talking about how we could fit in a little bit of exercise and where we fit this in when we were getting onto the call, right? But even small bits of white space. So blocks where there are no meetings, protected thinking time, scheduling your workouts if that's important to you before you schedule your meetings and schedule it a month out so you can't overlap and go, oh, I can't do it because I don't have time. Schedule you first and then schedule everything else around it. I guarantee you everything else will fill that time.
Perfect. Hard to do. So important to do.
Yes.
So important to do. All right. I know that one of the things that happens to us when we are overstressed, when our time is full, when there is no margin, is that creativity suffers. When we're burned out, we lose our creativity, but our creativity is our superpower. It is what sets us apart as business owners to be able to create the next thing, to be able to create solutions, to be able to move things forward. And so, Anna, creativity is in your wheelhouse for sure. So, what role does creativity or self expression play in helping people regulate and reconnect at work? And what does this look like in small and mid sized businesses? Like, can you give us some practical things that we can do to add some creativity back in?
Yeah, for sure. So I definitely specialize in creative solutions and kind of those out of the box approaches. And I really believe that creativity and self-expression, for that matter, are powerful tools for regulating and reconnecting because they engage parts of the brain, as we were learning earlier, that process emotional meaning when stressed and disconnected. What that could mean could look different for different people. Creative expression can help move out of that state. And I say move kind of purposely leaning into it because creative expression could simply be taking meetings outside for a walk. I mean, like it doesn't have to mean like we're all going to sit in a circle and do art, which is a really cool thing to do. That's what I do with my team, but we're creative therapists. um, but it could be doing things a little bit differently to engage your body differently to release some of the stress on the mind and the body. So it could be things like giving time in a meeting for like reflective responses or journaling, kind of like open brainstorming sessions. It could be like mindful movement or going outside for walking meetings. But the purpose being to help access some curiosity, some of the white space, in order to help create safety in the nervous system.
I like that. And I've also heard that humor,
Mm-hmm.
using humor. Now, I do know that in the audience today, we have a few of my team members, and I'm known for telling jokes during team meetings.
Got to loosen it up a little bit.
I can't seem to help myself, and they know this, and they know this. And sometimes I think if I ever show up for a meeting and I don't have a joke prepared, somebody's going to get disappointed at this point because humor breaks.
Yeah.
Because it's a different part of the brain that uses a different part of the brain. If you're very, very focused and you're task oriented and you're really, really in solving a problem, if you jump over to the other part of the brain where you're laughing, it kind of shakes it back up again and reopens things back up again to better problem solving, or at least a good laugh, which who couldn't use that kind of break, right?
Yeah. Laughter is
Right.
a huge release,
It's a
release,
big
and provides
release.
that somatic release as well. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. So there is a purpose between my dad jokes. Yeah. Yeah. I have a reason besides just being silly. All right. Monica, we're going to get over to you. How can women business owners use burnout screening tools? We're going to bring you this tool, which, by the way, we're going to send you right after this today. You will get that in your email today, anybody who is in this meeting. burnout screening tools. How do we use them to identify and address burnout early, for not only for yourself, but for your team? When and how do we use this tool with the team? Like, how often should we use it? How would you talk about using a tool with your team? And then what in the world do you do with the information once you have it?
Absolutely. No. And I think, and that is being doing the proactive piece. And so in the market, there is a number of tools that we have. I think the most known is one that is called MBI, which is the Maslach Burnout Inventory. And that's from Maslach. He was a researcher that created this term back in 1996. And the one that we're bringing you is called the Burnout Assessment Tool. And the difference between the two is I like the second one that we're going to be including, because not only does it assess for that cynical piece, for that exhaustion piece, for how we are not being productive at work, but it also adds the cognitive, the memory piece, and the emotional piece. And as women, we are driven by emotion. We are driven by a lot of our thoughts. And I just felt that the one that we are enclosing has more of themes that are more related to us as women leaders. And so I just wanted to take a moment to just go over, there are 17 questions that the burnout assessment tool has, but I wanted to go over 5 to see just, for women to see if they can relate to some of the questions. And so, and the scale is from not at all to very often. So one of the questions that measures whether you're exhausted or not is, I feel run down and drained of physical or emotional energy, right? How many times do we feel run down and drained? And then you assess not at all or very often. The cynical part, where you assess how cynical you are, is I am harder and less sympathetic with the people around me than perhaps they deserve, especially related to our team, the people that work around us. One that measures your emotions is I am easily irritated by small problems or by my coworkers and team. Right? At one point, we used to enjoy being around them, and now we could just feel it in the air. A couple more. I feel misunderstood or unappreciated by my coworkers. That's a big one, is when people really feel like they're taken for granted, that they're not appreciating for all the hard work that they do for whether it's a company or their team. And the one that tests for cognitive impairment is I feel that I'm accomplishing less and less in the time available. So I think if we're able to weave, and you could pick and choose any of those questions that work for you, and just bring them in when you're doing your a lot of companies have monthly meetings with your employees, and just throw 1 or 2 of those questions to just get a sense of where your team may be, encouraging not only self-reflection for them, but maybe sometimes people are able to notice it in us before we see it in ourselves. And I think the more that we're able to talk about it, we normalize mental health. We normalize that is safe to talk about these things. And then that helps us to adjust the workloads, maybe the schedules, and maybe even give them kind of what that pause that Anna was talking about, so that they are able to have a little bit more capacity to do their job. And so I think that when we're able to go in early enough, it's not just prevention, but it really helps us to build, to Bridget's point, build a team that is resilient and high performing.
That is fantastic. And something that came to me when I was listening to you, I think part of what I love about having an assessment like this that you can share with your team is that whole piece of normalizing the fact that everybody who's going through some level of burnout, these are the symptoms of that. And so if this is happening for you, if you are feeling like, oh, I'm not appreciated, or nothing, that I never catch up, I'm just, I'm not getting enough done. If all of that, that's a regular thought for you, and it didn't used to be,
Right.
then your job might not actually be the problem. It could be burnout. Because that's the next dangerous thing that could happen, is people will leave their job. They'll go find another job. I'm going to go do this instead because that job obviously doesn't work for me anymore. I'm going to go do this instead. But that follows you because your burnout doesn't stop when you stop working there. And so I think that's such an important part of having this kind of assessment and having language around it, to be able to help people realize that those symptoms of burnout, those are normal symptoms, and that even if you don't see that somebody else is going through the same thing, it's very likely that they are if they're burnt out too. So it gives them something else to look at besides, I need to just quit my job and go somewhere else. Because if it's burnout, it's gonna go with you.
And it takes a long time to be able to reverse the
Yeah.
after effects of burnout. That's the biggest piece that a lot of people, it's not just as simple as I'm just going to take a day off and just reset.
Right.
It's a mindset shift. It takes a lot of, what I was saying, pauses, intentional pauses, but it takes a while in order for it to feel like the relief is coming back. And that's why it's so important to know this is what we're dealing with.
Oh, perfect. You're right. Taking a day off, that's not going to fix it.
No.
I wish it would. Brilliant. Wonderful. All right. We're getting close to the end of question asking time. So, Anna, I'm going to ask you one more question. Then I've got a couple of lightning questions for the other two. Anna, your next question. How can small and mid-sized businesses practically make mental health a strategic priority and not just a perk? What is one structural change or even a cultural change that can move the needle?
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of as Monica was saying, it's going to take a while if you or your team members are already experiencing burnout, because there's going to be a lot of kind of cleanup, if you will, that needs to happen. But going ahead and implementing some of these kind of prevention strategies could be helpful. So weaving any of the things that we've talked about today into like your actual operations, not just talking about it with team members. We tend to go to these wonderful talks and trainings, and we get inspired, but there's often this lack of application. Maybe I'm just speaking about myself, but figuring out how to apply it to your team. So it could be, building a climate of psychological safety through modeling. So it could be as simple as that. It could be the modeling we've talked about, maybe with crucial conversations of pausing before reacting or giving solutions. It could be, reviewing team stress or burnout, as you'll get in the tool. It could be reviewing that as well as team capacity alongside KPIs or metrics with your team. So the numbers are still important. I mean, the numbers are very important. You have to have the numbers or you're not going to have the business. But also, if your team isn't healthy, you're not going to have the team to get the numbers, right? And so it is about figuring out how to do both, right? It's not an either or. It's not a like, today we're going to spend 3 hours on burnout prevention and then we'll never talk about it again. Because that's what most companies do. But it is figuring out how to weave it into your daily operations or your staff check-ins or your quarterly reviews. It is something that has to be put into more of a regular rhythm to make that needle actually start to move.
Beautiful. Consistency. Normalizing and consistency. I love it. Thank you. Bridget, I have a lightning question for you. Do you have that you can share with us one policy or meeting norm that you recommend to reduce ambient stress on a team?
Set your expectations around behavior and your resources, not feelings. This will reduce some pushback because once we get at feelings, those become subjective and tend to blow up. A powerful norm is no surprise expectations. So we were talking about the consistency. If something's urgent, then name it. If something's evolving, say so. Uncertainty is going to cause more stress than bad news, which I mentioned earlier, but nobody wants to feel blindsided. They want to see it coming. So if they know they see something coming, it's going to be better. And if your staff resists mental health conversations, right? So we're talking about weaving it in and not making it this big, hairy deal. But you can flat out say, because again, name it. I'm not trying to be your therapist. I want to figure out how we can work together to make positive change and to best support our team in X, whatever the situation is. And if you say that out loud, that takes the why are they trying to get it into my head out of the conversation and drives it the appropriate direction for the business.
I love it. Transparency. That's part of what keeps something a stigma, is that you don't talk about it.
That is
Right.
so true.
Oh, that's so true. That's so good. Thank you. And Monica, what is one metric or signal that leaders can track monthly to keep burnout visible and actionable?
Good morning, Signal. I was thinking that one of what might be helpful is those check-ins that we're talking with your team, asking them what's working, what's not working. And the biggest piece I think is how connected are you to what we're doing here? You know, whether it is a project, whether wherever the business is going to, is because once you feel disconnected, that's when we begin to lose them. So even having a one word opener and when we're having a meeting just centers them and grounds them. So I think as a leader, that is something that is actionable, small to do, but it definitely will send a signal to your employee or to your team member that we do care. And with everything else that Bridget and Anna have added, right, is I think it's just showing that there's an awareness. So that will be the metric that I will use.
Excellent. Okay. Wow. Phew. This has been an incredible 45 minutes of enlightenment, of knowledge, of just beautiful caring about people and who we really are, and the human side of not just our leaders, but of our people. And the fact that every business, no matter what you're selling, your business is still about people.